Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 54 of College Football Throwdown. I am your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello there, fans of college football and Husker fans across the world.
That's right. So we are here to do our traditional College Football Throwdown podcast. We're a podcast that is for college football fans by college football fans. We're going to be specifically talking about our favorite team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Briefly going over the game as well as our coaching situation, what's coming up next, and then moving on to the national conversation, the games from last week, the new rankings, and the coaching carousel that's been going at full force the past few days. So there's a lot on the topic for today.
A lot, yes, sir.
All right. But before we dive into all that, we have the most important thing of all, your beverage.
Yes, my beverage. Since I neglected to do it during last week's podcast, here we go, another cold beverage, so that I can be talking college football with my son while drinking a cold beer.
That was a good crack. That sounded good. Good. All right. So we're going to talk about the Nebraska-Iowa game. We had our traditional predictions on the last podcast. I was predicting an Iowa victory of 32-27. I thought that we would play them close but lose, and I believe this. You said that you agreed, but for the sake of being different, optimistic, you took the opposite. Said we were going to win 32-27, close victory. But then the final score ended up being 14-56. So
brutal. And it was 14-14 at the halftime, and like you and I spoke previously after the game, it very well could and should have been 14-7 or even 17-7.
Right.
With us in the lead, if we're not idiots.
Right. Well, right. And the reasoning for that was we had stopped them. They punted it, and we had some stupid penalty that gave them
running
a first
into
down.
The kicker.
That's right. That's what it was. And then on that drive, they ended up scoring. So right there, we take away 7 if we don't make that stupid mistake. And then we had another one where I think we were in field goal range. No, we went for it on fourth down instead of kicking the field goal. We did the fake, and we didn't get it. That's what it was. So just changing those two things and then assuming that neither team scored for those last 5 minutes of the second quarter, then it would have been 17-7 at half. Maybe things would have been different in that scenario. But
maybe, yep.
Yeah, but I was watching the game. I watched it through 3 quarters, and then after that, some friends were coming over and wanted to play video games, and I was like, yeah, I think this game's over. And
we're not going to do that in the future. It's my hope.
That's the hope. But the first half, we were at least competitive. Our defense was getting some stops, and like we said, with those 2 mistakes corrected, we would have been up by 10 by the end of the half potentially. So there were signs of hope there. Stanley Morgan was having a good game. But yeah, it has been the earlier in the season we were kind of like a second half team where we would make some good adjustments at halftime and play well in the second half. But in the second half of the year, it's been kind of the opposite. Like the second half, we just spiral. It seems like.
Yep. Well, and that was the thing, is that the tackling was so atrocious. And just the effort level, on the kickoff right after the half, et cetera, is just, we didn't even give ourselves a chance. We basically handed the game over to them, and then we just collapsed. And that's what I'm so sick of seeing. And what I want more than anything is for Nebraska to be a team that, regardless of circumstance, is a team that has the mental fortitude and toughness to play for 60 minutes full out, no matter what, and never stop trying. And right now, I would have to say that going all the way back to the Bill, you know what? I would say Frank Solich was the last coach that had a Nebraska team that played hard no matter what the score. Because I don't think it ever happened under Bill Callahan. And Maybe it happened a little bit, or there were signs that it might happen with Bo. But I think that was more a characteristic of his defense being a little bit ahead of the offenses until offensive coordinators got a chance to see his defense a couple times, and then they figured out that match read zone thing, and then it became a joke.
Right. Well, and I was thinking with Bo, there definitely were games where like we were down, way down, and we managed to come back. We had good come from behind victories, but then every season there would be at least one or two big blowout games where we would just look pathetic and give up. So you're right. You couldn't sustain that throughout a whole season, it seemed like.
No, right. And that used to be a hallmark of Nebraska's teams, is they were machine like. And so anyway, that's getting off topic a little bit, but bottom line is that that's a good summary though of the Iowa game, where basically it's another example of our team. I'm sure if you talk to those players, again, they would say they were trying as hard as they could. But when you watch the film, you can't honestly make that assessment. You look and you see the lack of effort. You see the flailing arms and the not squaring up the body and the lack of hustle and the slow reading and just the hesitation, everything that they did. And it was a combination of effort, confidence, all that stuff combined. Yep. Which made the result after the game fairly predictable, and you can go ahead and explain all that.
Yeah. Well, and as we've been talking about for quite some time, and as was fairly predictable, on Sunday, Mike Riley was fired as the head coach at the University of Nebraska, and Bill Moos held a press conference several hours afterwards, which I actually got to watch live.
And that was on Saturday, wasn't it?
Was it Saturday?
It was Saturday because we played the game on Friday.
No,
So it was
Yes, you're right. You're right.
Okay.
It was Saturday.
Sorry, go on.
No, that's fine. And not too surprising. And I was reading some things talking about how Moose definitely seemed to handle it a lot better than Eichhorst did the last time around, where apparently like he texted the team to tell them that Bo had been fired or something like that, and whereas Moose sounds like he had like a talk with Mike Riley, face to face, and then talk to the team and talk to the assistants and all that stuff.
Right.
And his whole thing in the press conference, where to me he definitely came off as professional and a guy who had the air of what he knew what he was doing, and he wasn't afraid to like be candid. He talked about how he had about half a dozen people that he was looking into, and that he was using search firms to reach out, and that he had connections as well from his time as athletic director at various schools and things of that nature.
Right, and which he is a professional. He knows what he's doing. He knew exactly where he wanted to go, and I think he had already done his homework, and he had already had the conversations that he needed to have. In that vetting process that happens before you even fire a coach like that, you should have at least some awareness. And like he said, he had 6 candidates that he believed had an interest in the job, but he had a clear pecking order of priority and what he wants to pursue. And the guy that's at the top of that list is not yet available to have that conversation. So that's why we haven't heard anything now since Saturday.
Right. Yes. He mentioned that a couple times, like respecting coaches' time. The time of the coaches who still have games left, and of course the press was asking him about Scott Frost specifically, and he mentioned, yes, we have reached out to Frost, or we've looked into Frost, and all that stuff. And then just today, I believe, it might have been yesterday, I don't know, but Scott was interviewed, and he mentioned that what was it? I would feel hurt if Nebraska wasn't interested in me, or something to that effect.
Right. Given his history with the program, and it's his alma mater, and as much success as he's having, if Nebraska's opening came open and it didn't include at least a conversation with Scott, then I think Scott's point is, of course I would be disappointed if that didn't happen, that they didn't at least talk to me. So I think that was an appropriate way to put that.
Yep. And there were rumors about Florida being interested in Scott Frost and looking to meet with him this past weekend, and apparently either that I guess that didn't happen. Like Scott wasn't interested at that point, or something to that effect. At which point Florida went in a different direction, ended up getting Dan Mullen. That's just a thing I saw online, So who knows if it's true? But we've been seeing the coaching carousel go around with these other schools like Tennessee and Florida, Texas A&M, and the like. And so far, not a peep about Frost from any of them. Which is making, I think, everybody think that everyone in the coaching sphere knows that Frost is already a done deal for Nebraska.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. Yeah, but I think it's important to note, because I know in past coaching searches, Nebraska has gotten criticized, whether it be this last time with the hiring of Mike Riley, where it was kind of out of left field. But he was clearly a guy that
Eichhorst?
Sean Eichhorst had his eye on and really had great respect for, and so it happened very quickly from Eichhorst's standpoint. It was clearly very high on Eichhorst's list, but he wasn't even on the radar of most conversational lists, right, of the hot upcoming coaches. And you think about some of the coaches that during that time. Similarly, when Bo was hired. Bo was the hot assistant coach, right? He was the hot coordinator, and he was clearly going to get a head coaching job somewhere. But to move from defensive coordinator at LSU to a blue blood power program like Nebraska was a huge jump, and everyone thought that they had a great chance for success because Tom Osborne was back at AD, and if Bo was smart enough to listen to Tom's advice, that Bo might grow into becoming a great head coach with Tom's tutelage. Didn't work out that way, but that was the vision or the idea. But even at that time, there were a number of experienced head coaches who might very well have been interested and available for Nebraska at that point in time, and they didn't take it. In fact, recently, the coach at TCU, Patterson, Gary Patterson, he indicated that he did get interviewed when Bo was getting hired, but he sensed that the decision had already been made by Tom that he was going to go with Bo. And so the interview with Gary was kind of cursory. It was kind of a complimentary type of thing, but wasn't very legit as far as the opportunity. He was clearly the backup if Bo said no or something fell through.
Right.
And so that tells you a little bit about those past coaching searches. Now, this one, I think we've got a situation where we have our top guy, the guy we want, and we're going to go after it. But now Florida, as an example, they ended up settling on their third or fourth choice, because the other people didn't want to take the job.
Right, because Chip Kelly went to UCLA, as many people were speculating,
and Scott Frost passed. When they approached him, he was clearly, the next guy in line, and then I don't know, and then maybe Mullen was the third choice, but that doesn't mean that's a bad choice. In fact, I think it's a great choice, and I would have been very happy if they had gotten Scott Frost and we had gotten Dan Mullen. I think the world of Dan Mullen, and I think he's going to do very, very well at Florida. And I would have been completely happy with him at Nebraska.
Right. Yeah. Well, and last time we went through this, after Bo was fired, Scott Frost's name was being bandied about even then as a well respected offensive coordinator at Oregon. But at the time, I remember us talking about he wasn't ready. Right, going completely from that and never having any head coaching experience and being so young, that would have been kind of a gamble. And now it almost feels like we're coming back. We're coming back. He's coming back home, or we're coming back to him, or whatever. It's like these 3 years were a good time to for him to prove himself, and now we're coming back to him or something like that.
Right. No. Well, the timing is better. He's still a very young coach. He's still a very young head coach, and by no means is it like this is not Jim Harbaugh being hired at Michigan, okay, where Jim had already coached a Super Bowl, right, and had coached Stanford out of the doldrums into greatness in his previous stops. this is a Scott Frost who's coached at a group of 5 level for 2 years. Okay, he's done well. Don't get me wrong, but he is by no means a proven commodity in that regard. Although I can simply look at his lineage and his background and the assistant coaches or the head coaches that he was an assistant under, as well as his own playing career, and you hope that he has the sphere of contact and influence that will help him and guide him as he grows into the coaching job. He's got a lot to learn to before he's going to be a great head coach at Nebraska.
Yep.
And of course, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. It hasn't been announced yet, but I'm confident. We were talking just before we started our podcast about percentages, and what was the percentage that you felt like you were at, what
70.
percent? 70% confident, and I feel like it's at about 90% confidence that our top guy is Scott, and that we are going to find out and finalize basically after this coming weekend's game is completed.
Yep.
And then they'll be able to have some conversation.
Yep, I definitely agree with that. I think it's coming up after this weekend for sure.
Win or lose, too, by the way, is the way I look at it.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't matter in our topic, although it'll look even better, obviously, if he wins, he's undefeated. Now, my last talk about the head coaching at Nebraska, if it's not Scott Frost, who's it going to be?
Wow. Yeah. Well,
and how badly will fans react if that's the case?
Yeah, I would have felt a lot better if it was Dan Mullen, but it's not. So, I tell you, I think it might be the Campbell from Iowa State would certainly be on that list.
Actually, sorry, but just to mention that, because I saw a headline about that, because I saw his name being bandied around. I believe he just signed some contract extension for so many more $1 million or something like that with Iowa State.
At Iowa State.
Yep.
And then I would say Paul Johnson at Georgia Tech and his underling who's now at Navy. The Navy coach Nia Paula, I don't even know how to pronounce it. I apologize. I would butcher it, but the Navy coach also would be a guy that we would look at, and I think there's a few others there that are on his list. That wouldn't be bad choices. But Dan Mullen, I believe, was probably one of his 6 that he was talking about during his press conference. I believe because that had not finalized with Florida yet, and so I think Mullen was probably one of the 6 that Bill Moos had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. This is off topic, but just since you brought up Navy, did you happen to see their uniforms for the Navy Army game?
Yes,
the Blue
very
Angels
cool.
ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I thought those looked cool.
I did too.
Yes.
I think those will be popular.
We have a special connection with the Blue Angels because they come to perform at the Cherry Festival in Traverse City every other year. So we have both seen them plenty of times throughout our lives. True. All right. So I guess since we referenced it, why don't we talk a little bit about the coaching carousel at large? Chip Kelly going to UCLA was the first big one, and then Texas A&M firing Kevin Sumlin, which was kind of expected. Arizona State fires Graham, their coach.
Yeah, Todd Graham. Yeah.
Right. Dan Mullen gets hired by Florida.
Right. Now, Graham has already been replaced at Arizona State by somebody who was Herm Edwards. Great hire for them. Great hire. Herm Edwards is going to do very well there. Herm Edwards is an NFL coach of some note. Has been in the booth and in the studio as an analyst for a number of years, but has decided to jump back into the coaching circles. And I think he's going to do a great job for them at Arizona State. I'm kind of disappointed I hadn't put him on our radar for Nebraska. He certainly would have been a guy I would have been excited about if he'd come to Nebraska.
Yep. And then I just saw today the Penn State offensive coordinator, Joe Moorhead, is replacing Dan Mullen at Mississippi State.
Right. Yes. And that's an interesting hire but I think a good one if you think about what Penn State's been able to do offensively the last couple of years.
Yep. And the elephant in the room we haven't mentioned yet is Tennessee, who fired Butch Jones as predicted. And then on Sunday, it was being reported by ESPN and the like that they were in talks to finalize a contract with Greg Schiano from
Ohio State.
Right, the defensive coordinator at Ohio State.
Right, but keep in mind, Greg Schiano was the guy that had resurrected the Rutgers program to the level of winning, pretty significant bowl games and really had done a great job, and then become an NFL coach and was a head coach in the NFL for a short time. Didn't do so well at the NFL level, and then was out of coaching maybe for a year or whatever, and then went right back into it with Ohio State and did great things there. So Schiano is a very well-respected coach, but ironically, and I think stupidly, Tennessee jumped to the conclusion that Greg Schiano was somehow implicated in the Sandusky sex scandal at Penn State, pedophilia scandal, and that he knew and didn't do anything, and this, that, and the other thing, because he happened to be on the staff at that time. And I think this, individual persecution of these coaches who have some kind of a connection to that program at that time and stuff, like this was all being covered up by everybody is in my opinion, a bunch of crap.
Right. Well, I believe, so I was reading into it a little bit because I saw like there were, people were protesting, the people and the politicians were like tweeting about not supporting it and all that stuff.
Right.
And this article I was reading was saying that there was a guy on the Penn State staff, I think a lower assistant, who had come forward in court to say like, oh, all these people knew, lots of people on the staff knew and covered it up and all that stuff. And that was all investigated at the time that the Sandusky thing was big. And nothing was shown about Schiano,
like confirmed. Right.
Right. No accusations against him or evidence, so all of this stuff that's going on right now is, just
all hearsay.
Right. All rumor, no fact.
I agree. And to destroy that guy's coaching opportunities, because now he is hot foam, man. He's not going to get touched by anybody,
Right.
I mean, other than to keep his job at Ohio State. And even then, now that the Ohio State people are aware of supposedly this connection, is there going to be some outcry at Ohio State? I mean, he's now on thin ice there. I mean, if anything happens, let's say Wisconsin was to slice and dice them up and score, a bunch of points like Iowa did, I guarantee you Greg Schiano might very well be getting replaced at the end of this year anyway by Urban Meyer, simply for unsatisfactory performance, but also to avoid having to deal with the repercussions or potential repercussions of this whole, tie to Penn State.
There's a possibility of that, but then also I think, right now, once again, just listening to the radio, now there's a counter blowback because Tennessee did the pressure got to them, so to say, and from what we hear, they were going
there was
to
a
have
letter of intent already written.
Right. They had signed something. There was, he might even be going after them for like money for backing out. So last minute and all this stuff.
Right.
And now they're spinning their wheels trying to get a new coach, and people are not biting. And there's a lot of blowback on them, on the athletic director for being so reactionary to the outcry. And it doesn't look great for their program as in terms of their dedication to their coach.
Right. And now they've asked to speak with Brom, who's the new coach at Purdue, who's just been at the Purdue program for 1 year, and now is going to be presented with the opportunity. Now you'd be crazy if you're the head coach at Purdue, which is a fairly moribund program, and someone is now knocking on your door to say, hey, I want to offer you, $5 to $7 million a year to coach at the University of Tennessee, one of the preeminent, SEC programs historically, and especially in recent history, and with incredible facilities and everything. I mean, you'd be crazy if you're Jeff Brom and you don't put serious consideration into that, even though maybe the AD hasn't handled this whole thing in the most PR sensitive way.
Right. Well, Jeff Brom, he's the head coach at Penn State, you're saying? I thought James...
No, at Purdue.
Oh, Purdue. Oh, okay. I was like, I thought that was James Franklin at Penn State.
No.
Okay.
At Purdue, but he's only been there a year, and he's really building something. So the question is, does he want to stick it out and try to build something at Purdue, where frankly he's probably got a little bit more job security? Because again, if he goes to Tennessee, he might get paid that big money, but it's only going to last about 3 years unless he's successful.
Right.
And he's going to have to recruit well, and he has to play Alabama and Florida and Georgia most years.
Right. He's in the toughest division in college football.
Right. So he's 9-3 at best every year starting out.
Right.
Until he really builds.
And apparently Tennessee was put an offer out to Mike Gundy today from Oklahoma State, and Gundy turned them down, which personally doesn't surprise me because I figure Oklahoma State must be, he's got a pretty nice gig there as well, although Tennessee could probably offer him more money.
Well, Tennessee could probably offer him more money, and there have been times when he's been on shaky ground at Oklahoma State, not because of his performance on the field, but because he's gotten into a few public spats with their major donor, T. Boone Pickens, who's their version of Phil Knight and Nike and Oregon relationship. T. Boone Pickens has given the university, hundreds of millions of dollars, and so T. Boone and Gundy have not seen eye to eye very often.
Right. And last question with the coaching carousel talk. I've also seen people talking about Jimbo Fisher at Florida State. They had a disappointing season this year.
Right.
But personally, I just think it's kind of...
That would be stupid.
Right.
You mean for Texas A&M?
Right. I think that's the rumor is Jimbo going to Texas
A&M. I can't
A&M.
believe that. No way.
But yeah, and given the fact that I know Florida State fans are disappointed with this season, but just like 3 or 4 years ago, you guys won a national championship. Like
exactly.
I don't see how they can throw them out.
They're not. No, Jimbo's not. I think it would be foolish if Jimbo Fisher seriously considered the A&M job. That would be a huge mistake.
Right. Yep, I agree. All right.
And he knows it.
Yep. So now we're going to move on to Week 13 of college football, the last week of the regular season for most teams. There were a lot of big games, and we had some, of our, what do you want to say, our simple predictions for some of the big games, specifically the Ohio State-Michigan game and then the Alabama-Auburn game. You said that you thought Alabama-Auburn was going to be a blowout with Alabama winning, and you thought the Ohio State-Michigan game was going to be close with Ohio State winning, whereas I said the opposite, that Ohio State-Michigan would be a blowout, and that Alabama-Auburn would be close. So I think
we were both right on one and wrong on the other.
Yeah, because and even the OSU
Michigan.
Right. That game, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a blowout, but OSU definitely had control in the second half.
I agree. And given they did that without their quarterback was pretty impressive.
Right. Well, yeah, the backup came in and played great.
Played well, yeah.
And simultaneously, Michigan had O'Korn in there, and he was not, performing as good as he could be for sure.
Right.
And then the Auburn-Alabama game, I was texting you as I was watching it because it looked like Alabama was about to come back, like there was some mistake that Auburn had made. Do. Yeah. Right, or they'd gotten a lucky penalty, and it looked like, here it happens again. But this time, no. Alabama made some uncharacteristic mistakes, having messed up snaps and things of that nature. It was quite surprising to see, and Auburn managed to pull it out. I
agree, and what's irritating to me is that You know, the everybody acknowledged all year that Alabama's schedule was surprisingly not very challenging, especially given who Alabama is. And so they would struggle if they lost any games because of it. And yet here we are because they lost to a good team. Don't get me wrong. I mean, clearly, right now Auburn is number 2 in the country in the current college football playoff rankings. So they lost to a good team, and they were playing them at Auburn. So I get all of those circumstances, but it still frustrates me that here at the end of the year, when other people would have been moved beyond the ability to come back into the mix, they hardly slide out of the top 4, even though they lose. And this is the thing that starts to bother me, to where this is proof in the pudding, so to speak, that in this playoff era now, even with just 4 teams, not all games matter, because Auburn just beat Alabama, and Auburn's going to have to beat Alabama again. Even though they're not in other divisions, this isn't because of an SEC West, SEC East thing. This is because they're going to end up having to face each other in the playoffs again, because Alabama's going to get in there because they're ranked 5 now, and somebody, most likely Wisconsin, and maybe to a lesser extent Oklahoma, are capable of getting beat. I think Clemson, Miami, I think Clemson wins that game, and I think that what's the other game? And I believe Auburn, Georgia. I think it's irrelevant. Whichever one of those teams wins that game is in. So that's not even important. But the ones that would influence who else is going to get in, because you've got Wisconsin at 4, Alabama at 5, and Georgia at 6. So the Georgia Auburn thing is a playoff, and the Clemson Miami is an absolute playoff. For the winner is in, the loser is out. Done, clean. So the 2 that are significant to influence the Alabama involvement will be TCU, Oklahoma, and Ohio State, Wisconsin. And we need to root heavily for Wisconsin and Oklahoma to win, because if those 2 win, then Alabama's out. And that's what I want. I really, I really hope for the betterment of college football that Alabama's been in the playoff every year since this playoff system started, and even in a year when they didn't really deserve to be in there. And so they need this college football playoff needs Alabama not to be in there, and I don't want them to have to put Ohio State in there as an alternative, because Ohio State's the same way. They've been in practically every year, including last year when they shouldn't have been. And so it just reduces credibility of that committee and this process when these same teams keep getting in year after year after year. Almost a built-in bias starts to accumulate, right?
Right.
And that's my fear. And you're going to regionalize the sport, and you're going to cause a bunch of people to lose interest in the sport, because they're going to realize my team has no chance of ever getting in. And it's a little frustrating to me to see a team like UCF, which in the Bowl Championship Series era would have definitely been higher than 14th with an undefeated 11-0 season at this point. And if they were to win their conference championship game and go 12-0, they would have been strongly in a position to be right in that mix. But because in this era, there's all this jockeying that goes on, all of a sudden a loss by Auburn at the end of the year, which historically in college football would have meant your chances for the national championship are gone, they're not anymore. That game didn't matter. Alabama could afford to lose it, and they're still going to get in. And that's the end result that frustrates me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, it's true, and and I guess we can talk a bit about the playoff rankings now, because personally, I had seen the AP rankings previously, which they had Clemson 1, Oklahoma 2, Wisconsin 3, Auburn 4, Bama 5, and I thought personally that was a proper ranking. That's one I could agree with. So to see Auburn jump from 4 to 2 over both Oklahoma and Wisconsin, even though they only have 2 losses, is frankly crazy to me personally. I know that they lost to Clemson in a close game and to LSU in a close game, but still, the idea that two
and
loss.
they beat Georgia and they beat Alabama. So they basically beat the number 5 and number 6 teams in the country, both when they were ranked number 1.
Right.
So within the college football playoff scenario, the team that committee thought was the best team in the country at that point, based on the information to that point in the season that they had designated for number 1, Auburn has beaten them twice in 3 weeks. That's
Yep.
That checks off a lot of boxes.
True.
That's why Auburn moved up the way they did.
True, and I could see them being ranked over Wisconsin, but I think Oklahoma maybe has a thing over them, and there's also the whole recency bias thing. Like Auburn clearly was struggling a bit more earlier in the season with some of those losses, but now they're coming to their own here at the end.
Right. And that has the feeling of college basketball. And again, those are the kinds of things that it makes sense. You can make the logical argument. Of course, you want the teams that are healthy and are playing at their best, at their peak, at the end of the year. Those are quote quote the best teams at this time in the country. But college football historically for 100+ years was not that way. College football was 100+ years is overstating it. For a long time, college football's tradition had always been that, hey, the whole season matters. Every game is critical. Every game is important. And it just frustrates me when I start to see these things play out, and it's starting to become a pattern where teams are getting in that, frankly, there needs to be an elevated importance to being a conference champion.
Yep.
That's my opinion.
Well, and they say that they rank being a conference champion very highly, so we'll see. If one of those teams loses that we discussed, and loses in close fashion too, then or wins in big fashion, I guess would be the way to look at it. There's an upset.
See, like Ohio State is the favorite.
Well, right.
In the Ohio State game, even though Wisconsin's undefeated, Ohio State's the favorite. But Ohio State would need to make a statement like they did a few years ago, where they kicked Wisconsin's ass in the conference championship game, won the conference championship even though they had some losses, but then still snuck into the playoff and ended up winning the thing.
Right.
There's a slippery slope there.
Yep.
That bothers me.
All right. So going back to this previous week, in terms of the big rivalry games, we mentioned Auburn-Bama. Auburn won 26-14. Ohio State beat Michigan 31-20. We had another rivalry game, Ole Miss versus Mississippi State. Ole Miss actually won 31-28, even though they were the lesser, or the, what do you want to say, not the favorite, the underdog.
Right.
There we go.
And Florida, I think Florida State won that one.
Oh, did they? Yeah, I guess they did.
Yeah.
Washington beat Washington State 41-14.
Badly, yeah.
Stanford beat Notre Dame 38-20. That was surprising to me.
And that was a big game, yep. And that's going to be interesting, too, with Stanford and USC. What do you do? USC gets back in the mix here, too, if they beat Stanford.
Yep.
And certain things fall, or certain chips fall the way they may.
And real quick, why don't you talk a bit about UCF versus USF, Central Florida, South Florida, 49-42. I saw the recap of the game, and it looked like it was quite a classic back and forth.
It really was. I mean, actually, it seemed like, early on, South Florida was kind of taking it to UCF, but then UCF... well, I shouldn't say that. I'm going to reverse that. UCF was in the lead, but then South Florida came back and got within a point, and it looked like they had kind of taken the momentum of the game, and they were the better performing team. But then UCF just kind of hung in there and kept making plays. And as the game went on, there were a lot of individual defensive plays that were made by UCF's defense to kind of hang around while UCF was struggling to figure it out offensively. But then UCF kind of started clicking offensively later in the game and scored and got to where it looked like they were going to have a comfortable lead, but then craziness started happening in terms of kickoff returns and that came into play, and just big, huge plays of blown coverage, that kind of made it a back and forth thing and very nervous. And I hope that maybe Scott Frost, the coach at UCF, might have something to to discuss and think back in his own mind about the fact that he was in a situation where all he needed to do was run clock, but instead he remained aggressive and threw the ball and scored too quickly, and then the other team took the kickoff and scored a touchdown on the kickoff return, and got right back in it. When if he had just ran the ball instead of throwing it, he could have run clock off, and it wouldn't have mattered because he had a two score lead.
Right, but it was UCF that got the kickoff return for a touchdown at the very end that won the game.
True. Okay, that's true. And so I might be getting things confused as far as the sequence, but bottom line is that UCF kicked the ball off after scoring, and then immediately the other team scored again.
Right.
And maybe that was the blown coverage that I'm thinking of.
Right.
But there was a big play, and boom, they scored very quickly.
Yes.
And we're right back in it. And so then you're right. Then UCF took it back for a score and got back to the 2 touchdown lead, and then they were able to kind of manage the clock off of that. But it gets back to even Scott, I think, in that situation, in my opinion, should have been less aggressive with the passing game and been more satisfied to simply secure, even if he wants to throw the football, low risk passes within the scheme of his offense and get first downs. Just get first downs and control the ball and control the clock. But instead, he threw it deeper and scored a touchdown quickly, and then gave the other team sufficient time to come back and make it interesting. I don't know why you would do that.
Yep. And as we've talked about before, if we do hire Scott Frost in Nebraska, I'm going to be very interested to see who he hires as his defensive coordinator, because that seems to be a theme so far of his team, is that defensively they haven't always been the best, but their offense is just so good that it doesn't matter, kind of in the Oregon philosophy.
Right. And you're absolutely right. I'm hopeful that he would be able to, formulate a staff that was pretty damn good. I think he'll probably bring quite a few of those guys with him. He really has expressed great fondness for the staff that he has. So I think a lot of those guys are going to end up going with him. But I'm sure he'll be getting lots of advice on that if and when that time comes.
Yep. And last thing I did, one of the highlights was there was a great option that scored a touchdown by UCF, where their quarterback kept it until he was getting hit, and he managed to shuttle it over to the running back to score. I was like, all right, I like that.
Yes. Well, and that's what I like about his offense, is that he it does have great diversity. It is a very hard offense to defend. But the thing is that if you have great athletes and you can shut down those wide receivers and just lock them up, then all those little side passes that he does that sets everything up. It's almost like the fullback dive in the old option offense. You got nothing then. Right. Because so you need that other element of power football, and I'm curious to see if Scott recognizes that. To play in the Big Ten and with the big boys, he's going to have some of that, and if he can figure out how to do that, then God love him, because he'll be greatly successful. If he doesn't, I think he might be another failed experiment. So we'll see.
Yep. And then last game to talk about is, of course, number 2 also got upset. Miami 14, Pittsburgh 24. Didn't think anybody saw that one coming.
No. And that was on Friday, wasn't it? Or was that Saturday morning?
No, it was it was Friday. You're right.
It was on Friday, yep. And that was one that I would not have expected. And now there's a guy that I wouldn't mind seeing come our way, Pat Narduzzi, the head coach at Pittsburgh. I would love that guy, because I love his defensive mentality. He's from the tree of Michigan State's coach, whose name is escaping me right at the moment. You know who I'm talking about?
Mark D'Antonio.
Mark D'Antonio, thank you. And just outstanding discipline, fundamentals coach. And that's what I want more than anything right now, is I want a coach who's going to teach fundamentals, and we need that on defense particularly. And so, like you said, I think one of the most critical hires that Scott Frost is going to have is his defensive coordinator. I mean, offensively, clearly he's going to have his hands on the wheel a lot and influence that a lot. He'll have somebody named offensive coordinator, but obviously Scott's going to be driving the thing a lot. Defensively, that's a whole different story, and so it'll be interesting to see what Scott does with the defensive coordinator role.
Yep. Okay. And so last thing, we're going to do our predictions. We've got the 5 championship games. So I was thinking we don't have to give like specific scores for each one, but just say who you think is going to win and if it's going to be close or more of a blowout. We'll say that a blowout is anything 14 points or more is a blowout.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll go with that. So I'll go ahead and start us off.
Okay.
I believe that Georgia is going to beat Auburn, in part because their star running back got hurt in the Alabama game. I'm not sure if he's going to be back. Is JT Barrett? Do we know what his status is?
I don't, and that's why I was just thinking that when you said you wanted to do these, because I really don't know, and I think that influences a little bit. Although that other kid played so well, I don't know that it will necessarily be a huge deal. But yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay, so I'm going to say Georgia close. I'm going to say Clemson beats Miami close. I'm going to say that Oklahoma beats TCU in more of a blowout, considering that they beat them earlier in the year, although, and not too long ago, it was just like 3 weeks ago, although I know that sometimes that fact that you won the first time, sometimes that can help the team that lost previously more.
Right.
So that's something to consider. Stanford, USC, I don't know super well, but I'm going to say Stanford just close, just because they just beat Notre Dame in such strong fashion. And then I'm going to say Wisconsin close, especially if JT Barrett isn't playing, but also just because I really want them to win.
Right.
I want to see Wisconsin be undefeated and get in, and not fall
Alabama
here right at the end. Yeah. So that's what I'm going to say.
I agree. I'm gonna be right with you on the Wisconsin Ohio State game. I'm gonna predict a Wisconsin victory because that's what I want to see happen. Not necessarily I'm going with my heart rather than my mind, because I think Ohio State's the better team, maybe by a significant amount. But I think that Wisconsin's a team that's playing with great confidence right now. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
And I forgot to mention this. Michigan was beating Wisconsin. They're playing better, or rather, Ohio State in the game. They were up 14-0 at the start. They had control.
Right.
So Ohio State has shown some holes, as well as the fact that Wisconsin has known that Ohio State is going to be their wall at the end of the year for a while now. And you better believe, I think, that their players and their coaches are going to be bringing their A game.
Right. That's what I think as well. It's just that when Ohio State takes away your number one option, which is running the football, is Hornibrook going to be able to do what is required, for them? And I'm gonna say my heart says yes, and particularly if that defense that Wisconsin has gets to attack a first-time starter at quarterback in a setting like that, because the Wisconsin fans are going to travel just as good as Ohio State. That's going to be a 50-50 crowd, or maybe even a little bit of a Wisconsin lean, because this has just been there, done that for Ohio State at this point, and everybody's going to be like, well, we'll wait and go to the first playoff game type of deal, whereas Wisconsin won't feel that way at all. They'll be all in on this game. So anyway, that's that one. Wisconsin, I agree with you there. Oklahoma, TCU, I actually agree with you on that one as well. Now on Auburn, Georgia, that's a good point you make about Auburn's running back. Boy, I do you know for a fact that guy's out?
No. Once again, listening to the radio this morning, there's been contradictory reports. So I don't think we know yet. I think
I'm going to assume that the guy plays, and I'm going to say Auburn wins because of their quarterback.
So you're saying close or blowout?
No, close.
Close.
Auburn wins in a close game, and then Clemson, Miami. Boy, I'm going to take Clemson, and I think there's a chance that could be a blowout. It'll be interesting to see what Miami does now that they, the chink is off the armor. Are they going to rise up and be tough guys, or are they going to kind of lay an egg? And they're kind of new to this at this point with the new coaching regime they have there. So I'm going to say that in this case, Clemson shows the maturity of being a defending national champion and plays really well and wins.
All right. And then USC Stanford.
And USC Stanford. I'm going to also agree with you on that. I think Stanford's the better team. Stanford wins.
Okay. So just to go over it, you're saying Stanford close, Wisconsin close, Oklahoma blowout, Auburn close, Clemson blowout.
Yep.
All right. Very good. Well, we'll see. We'll see how we do. I'm
That's
looking
right.
forward to. I was actually planning on an event on Saturday, but then realized, this is championship weekend, and so I rescheduled it because there's a lot of games I want to watch.
Yes, you're wise. And a few of them are at night, but some of them are during the day too, right?
Yeah. Well, especially for me on the Pacific Coast.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
I know the Ohio State Wisconsin game and the Miami Clemson game both start at 5 my time, so I'll be able to watch those two at the same time, which are the two I'm most interested in watching. So
right. Yep.
That'll be interesting. All right. I think this is a good podcast. We covered a lot of ground, and
we did.
Hopefully by the time we're talking to you guys next week, we'll be talking about who the next head coach at Nebraska is, crossing our fingers there, as well as because the top 4 will be announced on Sunday. So we'll be able to know who's in, who's out, and all that fun stuff. And then we'll get into bowl speculation and all that other postseason fun stuff.
That sounds awesome.
All right.
All right, Alex.
Yep. So if you all out there enjoyed listening to us, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can find us online at footballthrowdown.podomatic.com. You can find us on iTunes. You can leave ratings and reviews there. Let us know what you think of the podcast, where we can improve, all that sort of stuff. And so thank you for staying up late with me to do this podcast, Dad. And
all right.
Until next week, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.